what we've been seeing for the last few years has really been this expansion of the mass surveillance of the traditional financial system onto cryptocurrency. And I think we're at this really interesting inflection point in that battle for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I personally believe that the mass surveillance that we've seen in traditional financial systems, just from a United States perspective, is unconstitutional. What we've seen is massive amounts of our financial data being turned over to the government by default without a warrant, which is really quite shocking, but somehow has become completely normalized over time. And a lot of people just take for granted the idea that it's totally fine that our data, the data about citizens, is being turned over to the government by default. In my view, that is clearly unconstitutional and not something that should be happening. The reason that it's been able to happen is something called the third party doctrine. So the idea of the third party doctrine is any information you hand over to a third party, you lose your reasonable expectation of privacy in that data. And so that is the sort of giant loophole that has just blown a giant hole in the Fourth Amendment, where it is suddenly okay for all of these transactions to be handed over to the government through programs like the Bank Secrecy Act that Jay mentioned. And this has been, again, completely normalized. So where we are in that is a really interesting point. So where we are at this moment in time. So on the one hand, in the last few years, in the last decade, really, we've seen the Supreme Court really chipping away at the third party doctrine in the United States and basically saying, look, that might have been true. It might have been true that you lose your reasonable expectation of privacy in data you turn over to third parties back in the 70s when this doctrine was developed. But now the information, we live our entire lives with third parties, right? Literally every second, our phone companies, our email providers, everyone, we're at all times, we're sending data to third parties. And so the Supreme Court has really begun to chip away at that. Nonetheless, so I do think that if we were to challenge the surveillance that happens under the traditional banking system up at the Supreme Court level, I really believe there's a good shot that the Supreme Court would actually say, yeah, actually what's happening right now in terms of all this data being turned over to the government without a warrant about our financial transactions, that the Supreme Court would say that's unconstitutional. I think there's actually a really good shot of that. At the same time, what we're seeing is we're at this moment in time where the governments around the world, but just speaking in the US, is really extending that mass surveillance onto cryptocurrency. So things like, a few years ago, there was the Department of Justice in the United States issued this cryptocurrency enforcement framework in which they actually said that any privacy coin, that use of privacy coins, and they explicitly called out Zcash, the use of any privacy coin was indicative of potential criminal conduct. And they said in that paper that mixers and tumblers were illegal and as money laundering. So that was sort of like an early hint. And then, of course, we saw the infrastructure bill in the United States, which has created this sort of this system where any transaction over $10,000 in cryptocurrency is supposed to be reported to the government with people's physical addresses. And by the way, just as a side note, that's supposed to come into effect approximately now. Like the 2024 tax year. So pretty terrifying. Obviously, Tornado Cash. What happened with Tornado Cash? Another instance of expanding this mass surveillance onto the cryptocurrency space. And another big one, of course, is just in the last month or two, Senator Warren introduced a bill that was intended to, really, it would kind of grind the entire cryptocurrency space to a halt, but it explicitly targets not just sort of cryptocurrency in general, but also targets privacy coins and privacy technologies, and says that all financial institutions, which also includes a very long list of participants in blockchain ecosystems under the bill. So validators, miners, all sorts of wallet providers, that all of those institutions, because they're redefined as financial institutions under the bill, which is its own problem, would be banned from interacting with technologies that enhance privacy. So privacy coins, mixers, tumblers, right? So this is a bill that has been introduced. It was introduced last Congress, and I believe she's probably about to reintroduce it in the coming weeks in the US, that would would have a massive impact on who could legally use in the United States privacy coins. And so these are really important battles. These are really important battles for financial privacy, for privacy coins in particular. But I think they're particularly interesting because it's a moment where, because the cryptocurrency space has this fundamental ethos of privacy, right, of caring about privacy, of caring about civil liberties, we have this moment where we can fight back, not only about the expansion of this mass surveillance of the traditional financial system onto cryptocurrency, which is itself a battle worth fighting, but also, in my view, we can go one step beyond that and actually wage a battle about the mass surveillance of the traditional financial system in general. So I think it's a really interesting moment in time, really important battles being fought. And I think a lot of work this year is going to be focused on. I think we, as the Zcash community, are really going to be at the center of a lot of these battles in the coming year.